Welcome to the Manor Club Extra, where we're going to be bringing you 6 digital shows across the next 6 months. This is going to bring us across all of Oxfordshire, bringing everyone together while we can't actually get into the room at the Cowley Workers Sports and Social Club. And we'll have interviews with past players, as well as bring in physical activities. And everyone here at Oxford United in the community would like to thank the hard work from Age UK Oxfordshire and Active Oxfordshire to make this possible.
Malcolm and Rosie here, the kind of founding fathers of Oxford United in the community. Malcolm, talk to us about how it began and how you ended up roping Rosie in.
It started with a bit of a panic for me because I was a school teacher, Pierce School as it was at the time. I had a note from the secretary asking me if I could come to see her. And she said, "You've got to go down to the education house in Oxford to meet the chief education officer." I thought, strange. What have I done wrong? So I went down there, and my headmaster, Bob Moon, had not told me why I was going down there and that he was part of it. So I was sat there with Tim Brighouse, who was the chief education officer, and my headmaster, and a gentleman called Robert Maxwell. And unknown to me, because Bob Moon and Tim Brighouse were season ticket holders, and they wanted to see Oxford do more in the community, they, for some reason, decided that that would be me. So they gave me what was called a secondment to Oxford Polytechnic, where I would do something about football management with relation to schools. So I ended up with a degree, and I don't think I actually went there. But anyway, I used to send them weekly reports of what I did. So anyway, I started at the end of a school term, July. As Peter said, I think it was about 1893. Yeah, it seems like it. So I didn't have an office. So in the old manor ground there, I used to go in with the coach's office, which at the time was David Fogg. The manager when I started was Mark Lawrenson. Sadly, didn't last long, and his assistant, Brian Horton, became manager. And it was just a matter of planning, trying to get support from the staff and the players. And as part of the programme, we used to have schools coming every day to the manor. And Rosie got to know almost every school kid in Oxfordshire because he was just sat on the treatment table.
That's not a lie either.
So the great thing for me was, they actually saw a player, because obviously players used to go home maybe lunchtime. So the common denominator here in the community and the manor was Rosie. And at the time, it was just me. I was running the Centre of Excellence and the Football in the Community programme. And then, fortunately for me and for the club, Football in the Community programme nationally started, and that we were allowed to then bring somebody in. And we didn't interview or anything because there was no need to, because Rosie, he was always smiling despite the fact that, he was permanently injured. And it's funny, really, because Steve McLaren, who became England manager, he joined the coaching staff at Oxford United because he was also permanently injured. And Brian Horton said to me at the time, "Any chance of you giving him a job?" And that was Steve McLaren, who became youth team coach. But now, going back to Rosie, listen, he was a great ambassador for the club. He was great with the kids, and he wasn't one of them that was looking at his watch. He just loved it himself, and you could see that it gave him a big lift as well.
I think because I was injured for over a year and a half, because Brian Horton gave me an extra year on my contract because I was injured, and I had 18 months rehab. Nowadays, it's the same injury on a cruise ship is 6 to 8 months sort of thing. because I was out for so long. And during that time of being low and depressed but still smiling, Malcolm took me out to a lot of schools, and we did a lot of schoolwork, didn't we? And that kept me going. That kept me like buzzing, didn't it? And you kept me in good spirits. And we had a few lunchtimes as well, Malcolm, didn't we?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with Rosie was it was fine when he was at the Manor and sat in the treatment room. It was when we had to go somewhere. Timekeeping wasn't always Pete's best thing, but he always made up for it, because when he got there, he was absolutely fantastic with the kids, brilliant with the kids. You know, I've been to 4 big clubs since I left Oxford, and Oxford was a reasonably big club at the time, and I've never come across anybody with his enthusiasm and the way he dealt with elite players, grassroots players, you know, handicapped kids, you know, women, girls, etc. Just whatever it was, he'd be in there 100%. And, you know, everybody remembered him.
Was it a difficult transition from living the dream as a professional footballer to realising that you had no career on the pitch left, but you threw yourself into something else?
Yeah, because I was 28 when I retired. 26 when I played my last game of football as a professional was 26, and I was flying then, but injury happens. So the worst day of my life for me was walking away from the Manor with a bag full of boots, training shoes, and not knowing what I was going to do. I stayed on the school and did my qualifications, but I went straight into school straight into the apprenticeship at Chelsea and then moved to Oxford. I think my transition started when Malcolm got me out and about into the community. I always used to like to be able to talk to people, which, you know, is part and parcel of what I did. But some players didn't like it. You know, they used to have to go in hand in twos. And even though you play in front of 30,000 people, they still can't talk to 10, 20 kids in assembly. But I learned my trade and I changed my skill set, learning a lot from Malcolm, because Malcolm was organised, school teacher type, and he did it this way and did it that way. And I took a lot of what Malcolm set up for it. So, you know, but I put a little twist in things I did in my way. But because I was an ex-footballer, it helped. Because I played for Chelsea, it helped. So I used to play on that with the kids as well. But when you're turning up in your tracksuit and everything else instead of, you know, your normal sort of civvies, it works. You know, taking assemblies on health and fitness and talking about, I used to be fit in those days. Obviously things have changed. For now. But we went with an enthusiasm, didn't we? And we went with a positivity of different things, and we used to take players out. And as Malcolm has said before, because I was an ex-player, I had that respect from the players from the change rooms, because I used to, you know, I've only just stopped playing with them. So I used to go and say, listen, we got a school in Bicester that needs somebody to, and we used to say, you know, who can do it? Not you're doing it, you're doing that, you're doing this. It's, we got 4 or 5 players that live in Bicester who can, at 3:30, who can pop along after school. And players used to volunteer to do stuff for us. Some for different reasons, because they used to, after the sessions of the school, some of them used to nip off and down the local pub. No names mentioned.
It was called Team Spirit.
It was called, but we got promotion on it. That's fine. You know, you couldn't do it nowadays because, you know, you're monitored and it's totally different nowadays. But in those days, the players were very proactive out in the community.
Yeah, and listen, you know, not just bringing yourself, you being an ex-player, and should be never underestimated, because you had their respect. Mm-hmm. And it made it much easier to get them as part of the scheme. You know, the clubs I've been to since Oxford, very few of them, if any, have what we had. They have other things. They have resources. They have facilities. But what we had was actually the players.
Yeah, we used to have, because Oxford is in the middle of the country, as you know, and we used to come under the southwest, you know, with your Plymouths and your Exeter, your Torquays and your Bristols and your Swanseas and your Cardiffs, and that was our, and we used to meet up once every 2 or 3 months on a Thursday night or Thursday afternoon for meetings for the football in the community officers, overseen by the heads of departments and stuff, and we used to give a little chat of what we're doing, what you're up to, and put in your figures, Player involvement, Swindon would say, like 24 players have come out and done something, and Cardiff would say 10 players. And I used to go, we had 106 visits, appearances, sort of thing. And everyone was so jealous of our player involvement. Things do change, but players need to be a bit more proactive nowadays in all clubs, but more so, I believe. But we were always top of the tree, weren't we?
I think the other thing was that every Wednesday we'd go out to a cluster of schools. So, for example, if we were going to Abingdon, we'd send invitations to about 8 schools. So they would bring maybe 15 kids each, or however many you could get in a minibus. And we would take our minibus, which was a big thing for those kids at the time, to see Oxford United on a school site. And we used to take the YTS boys, and we almost created a culture that, I see itineraries during the week now for our apprentices at Fulham. And on a Wednesday was blocked off. That was the day where the YTSs, that they would come with Rosie, myself, and we'd take them out to a school, we'd subdivide the group of kids, and that was their culture. They got used to it. And obviously they have to do, things like referees courses and things like that. And it helped them enormously. Actually, talking to kids. Because as Pete said, lots of players can play in front of 50,000. They can't actually talk to 15 kids. I won't drop Matt Letizia in it here, but when he finished at Southampton, we wanted him to be an ambassador for the academy. And Matt was really shy, and he couldn't do that. And now you see him on the telly, you see, a personable, intelligent man. But at the time, he couldn't do that. He couldn't sit in front of a group of kids. And that was the other thing that was attractive to me in terms of Peter. He was excellent with people. And that's a big thing when you're doing jobs in the community.
So the club bought into it, the players bought into it. What was the reaction from the schools? Were they a bit surprised about what this thing was all about, or did they buy into it equally? Hold
on, Pete. That's where I got my degree. The local schools were delighted. The middle schools, the junior schools just didn't have a PE teacher. So us coming there, and of course, we used to have millions of letters, and I'm not exaggerating, when you're coming back. Because we try and do it as part of a process. We'd go to them. We'd invite them to us. We'd always put something about the club shop so they could go away with some memorabilia. Yeah. So, and also we'd invite them to what was the Unipart tournament, and with some schools, we got lucky that we used to run football courses at schools that maybe were in deprived areas, that had good facilities, but in a big catchment area. So, there were spin-off effects for Oxford United.
But the relationship that Malcolm's got with all the school teachers and all the heads and everything, because obviously he is as a school teacher. If I was to ring up, I'd go, yeah, okay, Rosie, no problems. Malcolm would ring up and say, yeah, of course you can have the facility for nothing, Malcolm. It's one of them. So we used to go to those facilities, but those kids were all abilities, though, Malcolm, weren't they? They weren't, and we used to go from, I think, 6 or 7 year olds, obviously they do them younger nowadays, but 6 and 7 year olds through to like 11 and 12 year olds. And we used to get hundreds of kids on the courses, from kids that couldn't tie their own laces to kids that were decent. So we had to work our coaches, and like with Mark Jones and Les Taylor and all the other coaches that we employed to work. It was difficult to work it, but we educated our coaches to work the all abilities. And all of a sudden, we'd pick up kids from those courses, wouldn't we, as well? And we picked up a few of those kids, and they've gone on to make it.
Oh, absolutely. I talk to some Ricketts, for example, once a week. We've got a player on loan there, which I orchestrated. And of course, with some Ricketts, you've got Dean Whitehead.
Exactly.
And they still reminisce about the days when they were at Oxford.
Yeah. Chrissy Hackett's another one.
And Chrissy Allen.
Yeah, Chrissy Allen.
So for me, I still live in Oxford. I still follow the club, religiously. And it really interests me what's going on community-wise, academy-wise. You know, we at Fulham, we've put a couple of players in here, Nico Jones and Rob Atkinson. But, you know, what Peter and myself have done throughout our lives, really, is work with young people. And I think, you know, some people find it a challenge working with players with little ability, you know, because we all know that sometimes kids come on courses and it's a babysitting service. But, you know, that's where Rosie, Les and Mark Jones were brilliant, whether it was a player who might play in Oxford's first team or whether it was a kid who was just coming, you know, for an activity session.
Because his mum chucked him out the door.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but those are the sorts of things that I think we got lots of credibility for. The fact that we didn't discard anybody, you know, that we tried to be totally inclusive. And if we found a kid like Simon Weatherston, for example, you know, who's now assistant manager at Bournemouth, you know, we had kids like that, you know, and that was the beauty of things, that you saw players with lots of potential, and then you saw kids with smiles on their faces who couldn't really kick a ball where they wanted it to go.
It was a time when the club didn't have a sophisticated scouting network or a scouting network at all. You were effectively bringing, you know, entertainment and activities to school children, but you were looking for those jewels in the rough, sort of thing.
But obviously we gave them the tournament that Malcolm talked about, the Unipart tournament, which was the under-11 tournament. And that was all schools in the whole of the county, 250 schools in the county that we used to target. But in those days, they were allowed to come in a minibus and they were allowed to bring everybody in, a couple of parents in down at Blackbird Leys Leisure Centre, Reedfield Gym, that's what it was, for the old people that are watching. And it was Piers and it isn't now. But we were able to do it, and those tournaments were so well organised by Malcolm, school teacher, ex-school teacher, and we took that on board as well. So, but we had the referees, you played in it as well, Tom, but the referees were the youth team, so we educate them. They used to run like clockwork. We used to have over nearly 100 kids, 100 schools in that tournament. And then we, on the side of that, Malcolm said, should we run the under-9 tournament? I've gone, we haven't got time, but we did. And there was about 80 schools in there, and we were the most successful team in the country, because obviously that tournament, you get a winner from the under-11s. Every club in the country gets a winner, because it's run by everybody above us as well. And then you play in the regional final, then you play in the area final sort of thing. And in the end, you play at Wembley pre-match to Johnson's Paint or whatever it was. Headington Middle, Temple Cowley, Kirtlington. Honestly, we've won it, and we've been to Wembley more times and the Millennium Stadium more times than any other club in the country, and that's down to the organisation, because other clubs organise it. Torquay, Frankie Prince down at Torquay said, "How many of you?" I said, "We've got 98 schools." So we had the best team from 98 schools, where Torquay used to run it down there and have the best team from 7 schools. So we want a winner, and from that we used to pick so many kids up.
Yeah, the beauty of it at the time was that we had massive support from the players, the management. Yeah. You know, you had Pat McGeer at the time. You know, he was really interested in the community programme.
He was the managing director.
And he was the managing director that Robert Maxwell had put in here. You know, and I think that the players also, they enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
You know, whereas I fear now that some players at most clubs see it as a bit of a chore. You know, lots of players do lots of good things, but, you know, where we were lucky back in the 90s was that, you know, players saw it as part of their contract without being in their contract. They'd come to the office and go, "What's on this week?" You know, so we had a small office at the Manor. And ironically, I had both my hips done where that office was big.
Really?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. But that office, you know, there was yourself, myself, Les, Jonah, and we built up a team spirit because you couldn't move in that office. So you'd have good banter, you know. You have
bad banter.
Bad banter, yeah.
We had paperwork up here, no computers. We had paperwork up here. We had Alison in the main office typing everything out. And also with all the connection with the schools was tournament visits, stadium tours and matches. We used to invite so many kids to matches, didn't we?
I think a lot of people from various generations in Oxfordshire will remember pre-match activities with both of you on the microphones at the Manor, those relay races. How did that all come about, and was it always plain sailing, getting access to the pitch?
It was sailing very close to the wind. Mick Moore was a good friend of Peter's and mine, but friendship counted for nothing.
Not on match days.
Mick, to be fair, he took it on board. He realised that the club was about the community programme, the Centre of Excellence programme. His pitch, bar the slope, the actual playing surface was second to none. Actually, I do him a disservice. It was the best pitch, apart from the slope. We used to have things on the pitch. I think the day it went better than ever was when his son was actually involved, Pete.
Yeah, see, Malcolm was a good negotiator in sort of thing. It's all mixed up. I'm not sure if I can do that. And they go, would your son like to be a mascot? Or would he like a penalty shootout? Get on any time he likes, son. So can I just say, I've learned a lot from Malcolm. It is about looking after people.
But no, and listen, we used to also be helpful to Mick that if the weather was poor, we'd have a relay around the pitch, for example, and we'd have one team in Oxford colours and the opposition team's colours for the other group. I'd hate to say this in case there was a betting scam, but the Yellows always won just at the end. And it actually put the home supporters in a good frame of mind just before kick-off. And it was always nip and tuck. Pete made the rules. I just followed it on the microphone. I
think the last lap, and then all of a sudden the Yellows were slightly behind, and then it was one more lap, and then we were still one more lap, and we used to look at. That's when I did look at my watch and go, okay, tell the manager we got 2 minutes. We've got to keep going until the Yellows win. I remember the one we did the relay for Newcastle against Newcastle. We had Chrissy Hackett, and he was the sprint champion under 15s, wasn't he? And every time we got to Chrissy, the Yellows were behind by about 20 yards, and the Newcastle supporters were packed in the Cuckoo Lane end. And Chrissy Hackett would just go, and the crowd would go mad, and Malcolm be on the mic, and then we'd go behind again, and then Chrissy would just overtake. And Kevin Keegan was manager at the time, and Keegan came out and stood next door to me. And he's done his team talk. We are 10 minutes before kickoff, and he's watching Hacks run like the wind, and he went, "Who's that boy?" And I said, "Never you mind." And he said, "I want that boy." And I said, "You can have him at some stage. We're going to have to pay for him quite a few million." And he went, "He's quick." I said, "Yeah." And it was so. And you're right. The atmosphere was incredible for kickoff. But we can't nowadays. Can I just say nowadays it's difficult because. We did it before, but because that's when the players, we used to come off at about 2:30 and then go back on again at 3, or even 20, come off at 20 to 3. Nowadays, the players come off so close to kick-off, it's a problem because the heart rate needs to stay up and everything else. So we've only got a window of about 8 minutes, and you can't do the relay. So we do relays at half-time now, when people are having a wee and having a burger and stuff. But it does create still a good atmosphere. Yeah, and it's still rigged as well, by the way.
Good. I'm pleased about that. Good. But the other thing was that, at the end of whatever activity we were doing, the kids would go around the pitch and there was respectful applause, which was really nice.
From both ends.
Yeah. And the away end, fair play. That was exactly the same.
Because the away supporters have travelled all that far, no matter whether it's from anywhere, and they never get that entertainment from other clubs because we were one of the first to do. Yeah, but that was off the pitch. So on the pitch was even more entertaining.
Yeah, brilliant. But I can remember one day standing out in the middle. There's a game going on, and I'm thinking to myself, they're drawing. It's 5 minutes before kickoff. What am I going to do? And Rosie sort of around there, and I'm thinking, what should I advise him to do? And I thought, sod it, I'll just carry on. So the game came till about 2 minutes to 3, and looking for Oxford United's result, if you were a fan, you'd have to wait a bit longer because the kickoff was delayed.
Done that a few times. And
Fortunately, we won because Brian Horton would have murdered us.
Boynton was good. I know when we played, was it Cambridge?
Cambridge United, the one and only John Beck at the time. Yeah, that was a funny evening because once a year we used to have the Centre of Excellence kids on the pitch. And I mean from under 9s to under 16s.
100.
So there was 100 plus kids. And we used to work on skill things with them. Peter used to do all these things that they would interact during the pre-match. And I went to Brian Horton. I said, Brian, we've got this Unipart Centre of Excellence display evening. And lots of these kids had come from our community programme. And he said, Cambridge United. And I said to him, why Cambridge United? He said, you know as well as me that they will come on the pitch before kick-off and they will demolish the half that they're kicking about in because they didn't want a smooth surface. So Brian said, sort it out. So in conjunction with Pete, we facilitated behind the Beach Road stand. Was the Beach Road, wasn't it?
Cougar Lane, right?
Cougar Lane, that's right. That we had an area where they could do their pre-match and not come on the Manor. And when John Beck and the team arrived, they went bananas. And there was a bit of a confrontation between Brian and John Beck, and there was only one winner there.
Yeah.
So Cambridge United went outside the Manor to do their pre-match.
Over to JR, wasn't it?
Yeah. So when we kicked off, the pitch was immaculate because the kids had all worn trainers. So that was, and we won the game convincingly. So it was a good night all around.
Did you get your win bonus for that night? Because I did.
Yeah, no surprise.
No surprise.
So things have obviously changed, in the 30 odd years since. How has Oxford United in the community and what you can do and what your remit is when you go out into the community?
As I say, things evolve and things change for different reasons. So when Malcolm left a couple of years after 1893, I took everything on board and everything else, and he left. We'll talk about where Malcolm's gone from here. He's gone from Oxford to different places. Les and I and Jonah were still involved, and we tried to continue what Malcolm had set up. But it used to just be a bag of balls and bibs and cones and stuff and going out to schools and that. And then schools rung up and said, we've got a problem with discipline. Can you come in and talk about discipline with the kids? And so I used to go in and talk about that. One school said that they've got problems with bullying. So I used to go in and talk to year sixes about the anti-bullying and stuff. So we had to re-educate ourselves really as coaches. We did a lot of reading with the kids as male role models because a lot of the kids didn't have a lot of, very sort of good backgrounds and male role models at home. So we went in and set that up. Anti-racism talks at secondary schools as well, because obviously football was full of racism problems back in those days, and I was involved in a lot of that in both at Chelsea and Oxford. So you could talk about it from the heart. And then obviously the player involvement started to lessen a touch, so we had to move on to different things. So, but the scheme is still massive, because Oxford is one county club, unlike some of the clubs around. So we were still massive, and we were still able to give out complimentary tickets and stuff. So that's evolved. But I know nowadays with Alex and Chris and all those boys that are running it, things have changed because there's a lot more paperwork now. They're doing different things. They've got to sort of jump through hoops with a lot of things, and the player involvement isn't as big as it was, which is, as we've discussed, is a massive part of the scheme. But it's still big. It's still big in Oxfordshire. And, and if schools want to get involved with Oxford United, they need to contact us because, we've got so much to offer still.
And I think you touched on it there, but when school children are perhaps difficult to reach, difficult to engage with, when they see a football club coming in or they see that football badge on a minibus or something like that, you can reach kids that, it's hard to reach otherwise.
Yeah, it is. I mean, some of them, aren't able to come to games sort of like financially and different things, because we used to get them to games in minibuses on blocks. So the parents didn't need to come. The two teachers would bring, you get a 15-seater minibus. We used to give, I can remember doing the paperwork, 13 kids, 2 adults, wasn't it? That's all it was, 15-seater minibus. And so the parents used to take them to the school in Banbury, or Mr. Nix used to come down, didn't he? And all the head teachers used to come down with a teacher. But nowadays, teachers don't want to work on a Saturday, you know, and it's not viable for, you have to sign all the kids out of school and stuff nowadays. And it is tough with the child protection issues and everything else. And it is totally safe at the Kassam for kids to come, but the parents have to come along. But we're encouraging parents to bring their kids again, which makes us season ticket holders in the long term. And even if they come to 1 or 2 games, they get the buzz and the feel of it. And especially at the Manor, when we were so close, you know, that there and you could actually nearly touch the players. It's a bit different at the Kassam, but you still get a good atmosphere. But things evolve in different ways for different reasons, but the scheme is still massive.
And it's important for the football club. I mean, it's what brings new fans to the game, isn't it? A lot of Oxford United fans who are now season ticket holders will have probably watched their first game on a scheme like this.
Yeah, but we talked about, I mean, I've been involved 3 generations, 36 years at the club, so you go back to 1984 when I first signed, all those old boys sat watching me, moaning about me and, you know, chucking their season tickets back because I've had a stinker. Those boys are now like the really old boys now. So I remember when I first took over with Malcolm with the community, say, my dad says that you used to play for Chelsea and Oxford United. Say, yeah, I did actually. Oh, wow. And then later on they say, my granddad says that you used to play for Oxford. Yes, I did actually. And then later on they go, my dead granddad used to watch you, you know. Oh, fine. Off you go, son. But that's 36 years on. Is that so? I mean, I go shopping in, you know, sort of Tesco's and other stores available, by the way, and I can guarantee some old boy will go, "Oh, Rosie, son," and they'll talk to me, and then some young middle-aged man would say, "You used to coach me," and he's big hairy, and then some little kid will say, "Were you on the mic on Saturday?" So it's that generational thing which I love. You know, and it's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. Listen, I talk to lots of ex-players who are here, and it's interesting. 2 names. They were both presidents of our junior supporters club. Paul Simpson, who's won the World Cup with England, and is now first-team coach at Bristol City. I speak regularly with Paul, always have done, and he always comes back to those days at Pearce School, or we used to go to Cheney School pre-match, and the players would pop in there. I never forget the day when Joey came back and was about to make his debut, and our 2 guests at that supporters pre-match were Joey Beecham and Chris Allen.
Yeah, the juniors, yeah.
You know, so lots of people, like Jimmy Magilton is now Director of Youth in Northern Ireland. And Jim often says to me, "Ka, the things you used to involve us in," he said, and we used to have the banter in the dressing room about some of the kids we'd seen. Oh, that was a good player. Just things like that. And they still remember. And that's part of their DNA, I think. Because that was the other thing, Pete, with players. The community scheme was part of their DNA.
It was.
You know, without question. You know, people that I didn't know that Pete knew because he played with them. But, you know, it was interesting to see the ones who were confident out in the community and the ones who just, it wasn't for them. Yeah, Steve McLaren, you know, he was brilliant with the kids. Brilliant.
And you've both got rapport with the fans by being on the mic pre-game. I mean, some will remember Malcolm, and to this day, Peter's on the microphone at time and pre-match. Was that something that you initiated, Malcolm? And what's the thinking behind talking directly to the fans?
Well, I think I like being a player, you know. What gives you the buzz as a player, which makes it difficult at the moment, is, you know, your supporters. You know, and I think that we decided that if we could involve the supporters in the scheme, which we did, indirectly, but also directly, because they'd get involved. You know, particularly when we put one team in yellow and the opposition's colours. You know, there was a competition before the game. So it was worth getting to your seats early. You know, it was one of those things. It was almost an expectation.
And also, we used to do the draw on the pitch for the mascots for the next 4 or 5 games. Well, here we go, we got the draw and the old tombola thing and everything else, and then and that was that. Oh, it's the draw, quick, getting our seats nice and early because my grandson or my son might be mascot, and that was great, isn't it? It was never fixed, though, was it, Malcolm?
My 2 sons were mascots, one for Swansea, one for Oxford.
It's amazing, that,
That was
isn't
a
it?
shock.
And where were you from?
Closer to Swansea. But no, listen, I think we're as much fun as the kids be.
Yeah, I think the enthusiasm from us helped. But what a job to have. I mean, transition-wise, coming out of the football game, at the pro game, which was obviously the best job I could ever have as in my life, because everybody wants to be a pro footballer. And I had 11 years as a footballer, some of those injured, whatever. But I managed to do the job that I love and I wanted to do. I've come out and think, what am I going to do now? Got involved with the community, still involved in putting my shorts on and my kit on, and you needed to have that buzz, and seeing the kids come on a soccer course like this and then going home like, oh, I scored a goal today, Dad, or did a step over, or I want to go back tomorrow, and this one, that gave me more of just as much as a buzz as being a footballer. I've now moved on to commercial stuff, and I'm on, 7 years, 22 years in the football in the community I did, which is crazy. I'm only 29, it's amazing. It's a heavy paper round. But obviously I moved over to the commercial side now. I've got 2 young kids now, so obviously needed no money in the community. No money in the community, so I moved over to the commercial side. There's not much money there either. But it's great, and I'm still involved on the pitch, and I'm still doing stuff, and I'm still working at a football club. How great is that, really? So.
The 90s were a turbulent time for Oxford United. Malcolm will probably remember, having to help players move on to keep the club alive, and Rosie will have some mixed emotions, I'm sure, about that famous Marlow FA Cup game. Talk us through that period in the club's history.
Well, mine was Joey Beecham, who was obviously a young player. He'd come through the club's centre of excellence at the time. He was a top player, in my opinion, and many people's opinion. And he went to West Ham United, supposedly for £1 million. Unfortunately, Joey didn't really take to it, and subsequently left within a matter of maybe a week and a couple of days, which left us, by us, I mean the football club and the local community, the supporters, in dire straits, because that £1 million effectively was going to keep us going at the time. So I remember Keith Cox saying to me, the deal has to happen with Swindon. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not sure I can do this, because Swindon, Joey Beecham, lived in Wood Farm. Anyway, I decided I had to do it because the club were important to me, still are. So I went to Swindon, never forget it, because they were just building a brand new stand, which looked really impressive. They just gone to the Premier League or the equivalent. And I met John Gorman, who'd taken over as manager from Glenn Hoddle. And it wasn't an easy conversation. I don't think John realised what he was doing in terms of, yes, Joey, top player, but Oxford, Swindon. And anyway, the deal was done. And Oxford United survived. And I was delighted to get out of there. I had explained to Joey what the consequences for him were. But to be fair to Joey, he knew how important that was to his hometown club. It didn't go well, obviously, but Joey Beecham effectively saved Oxford United.
We could have done with some FA Cup money, but the man next to you scuppered that.
Yeah, I remember the day before thinking, Pete, what happens if you beat us?
Well, first of all, when the draw came, I remember I was sat with Sam Ricketts and Dean Whitehead. We were at a Centre of Excellence game, obviously, when the draw was being made, and we came back in the minibus, and we were sat in the minibus on a Sunday at the ground, at the Manor, with the radio on, doing the draw, and because Marlow were in the hat, obviously Oxford and everybody else, because I think we'd beaten Cole Shorten the round before, and because we were Ryman Prem or Ryman 1 then, Marlow. And I said, we're going to get Oxford, of course we are, sort of thing, it's meant to be. And when the draw came out, it went Marlow, I went, it's got to be Oxford United. And I've gone, oh no. So in the end, I've had to go and knock on Dennis's door, Dennis Smith, the manager, and Malcolm Crosby. And I said, Dennis, obviously, it's quite unique that I'm the only player, apparently I was the only player ever to play against a team that was paying him, employed me. And I said, I need to have your permission to play against you. And he said, Rosie, he said, wherever I was 30. He said, you're 35. He said, you've got the worst knee I've ever seen, and you've never been a left back. We want you to play. And I went, game on. So I've gone back to Pete Foley, ex-Oxford United legend as well, and he's a manager of Marlow. So I said, I'm in. So we played, expecting to, because Oxford were flying that season as well with Paul Moody, Johnny Byrne and Matty Elliott and Phil Whitehead in goal and Les Robinson, honestly, Chrissy Allen. And anyway, we won 2-0. I made the first goal for John Caesar, and I'm thinking, OK, that's not good. Good goal, but that's not good. And then I thought, OK, I'm sure they'll get a couple. And then we scored another one late on as well, and I'm thinking, OK. And I remember the final whistle that it went, everyone just went mad, and I just went nice and quiet, and I didn't know what to do. And all the players come over to me, the Oxford United players come over and said, well done, congratulations. Dennis shook me by the hand and said you deserved it, and played to win. I was a decent pro. If I pulled the boots on for Aberdeen Town or Oxford City, played to win, I'm sorry. But I remember going out in the first half and the warm-up, and all the Oxford United supporters were like, boo, hiss Rosie, we pay your wages, like, yeah, all right, yeah, we're going to beat you 7-0. And at half-time when it was 0-0, after I'd smashed Stuart Massey and I'd got Paul Moody by the throat and got him booked, whatever, and I'd run past Les Robinson once, and I'm thinking, and the half-time whistle went and everyone was like, Rosie, we hate you, and it was like people spitting at me and throwing things at me, and I'm like, OK. Anyway, we won the game 2-0, and that was on the Sunday. We went in on the Monday, and I came to Malcolm and I said, I don't know what to do. Because the boys because it was a Sunday game on Sky, the boys were in on early training on Monday morning, weren't they?
Yeah, I never forget it. I thought, what's going to happen here? So Rosie bravely decided to go down the corridor from our office to make himself and the boys in the office a cup of tea. I don't know whether it was him being a bit naughty and popping in the changing rooms, or I think maybe the lads enticed him in.
I think that I got called in. I think Matty Elliott went, Rosie, so as I went in, because at the Manor there was 2 doors, wasn't there? One in, one out sort of thing. As I went in, I heard the door lock behind me, and I thought, oh dear. And if the lights go out, I'm struggling here. And the boys did throw boots and things, and they did have a little bit of it was a respectful beating, to be fair, and I took it on the chin, literally. But I said, sorry. And they said, no, you deserved it, and we didn't step up, they said, and we're doing extra training, but thanks very much. And they went up, shot over, and did a bit of running, I think.
And what was the reaction when you next met the Oxford crowd at the Manor?
That was the following week, I think. I just remember being a little bit head down, and as I was walking in, we were doing activities on the pitch, and I remember specifically that day as if it was yesterday. I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but this was, I know what, this morning, but I know what I did many years ago. And Malcolm was on the mic then, and I took all the kids that had been involved on the pitch over to the Osler Road stand and made sure everyone was back to their groups and everything's fine. And I normally walk either across the pitch or around the London Road end just before kick-off. And I thought, and I had that gut feeling that I wasn't liked. And there was a lot of people shouting, traitor and, well, you cost us $500,000 and in those days and the next. So I decided to walk around Cuckoo Lane, but Malcolm was on the mic, and bless him, I heard him, because the PA system was better at the Manor than it is at the Kassam. I heard Malcolm say, hang on, quieten the crowd down, because he was good at that. Shh, 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 shh. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, obviously going back to last Sunday, Rosie's obviously played the game, and but being a true professional, he's very complimentary. It's not just Rosie's fault, it's everybody else's fault and whatever, and very complimentary. And instead, I'd like to give a warm, a little round of applause for the true pro that he is or was. And he went, and he beckoned me across the pitch. It's that longest walk. It's like walking up to a penalty from the halfway line. And I thought, okay. And as I walked, everyone clapped, and I got got a bit of a standing ovation from everybody, including the Elias family as well, which was nice. And and that gave me a tingle now, and it gave me a tingle then, and from then on we moved on, and it was fine. It didn't help that I think Keith Cox said in the paper the following day was Rosie cost us $750,000 or $1 million, and there's a picture of me like bit of a setup, I think. But Malcolm dug me out of that hole, mate. I appreciate that.
And speaking of moving on, Malcolm, your time at the club ended, and you've gone on to represent some big clubs in the Premier League. Tell us about your journey since leaving Oxford United.
First of all, I think coming into professional football when I did, being a school teacher, that wasn't an easy decision because school teaching was safe in terms of employment. I just got married, and coming into professional football was certainly not a safe industry. So it took a bit of persuasion, to be honest, in the first place, because my wife understandably was worried that you get the sack, what you do, and I know that it's part of the game, and I've learned that over time because I've seen lots of good people that I've worked with, be sacked, and that's a sad day. But listen, Oxford United, the 15 years or so that I had here was fantastic. I still love seeing Rosie out on the pitch on a match day. Just lots of memories, lots of laughs. And that's fantastic that has continued. I do see Oxford United in the community at schools, maybe, Dorchester, for example, where I live, and round and about. I tend to have a lot of respect for the people who work in the community because I've been there and I know how tough it is now. But, the boys who work in the community are still very much part of my DNA. And experiences that I had with Peter, Jonah and Les, I think have stood me in good stead. When I went to Swansea, which is where I went from here, I really went to Swansea because A, it was my hometown club, and B, they were promised a new stadium. The stadium didn't materialise, so I was only there a couple of years. They were good years, good manager, who people remember, John Hollins. So that when I left to go to Swansea, I thought that's where I would stay for the rest of my days. I was going home, if you like. And it was a big wrench to leave Oxford because my family home was and still is here. And I was fortunate. This is probably what got me respect. I went to Southampton. I was fortunate enough to oversee the likes of Oxlade-Chamberlain. My first signing there was Theo Walcott when he was 12. Bought him for £2,000. Just think what the people at Swindon thought of me. That was a good moment as an Oxford supporter. But, when you look now, Luke Shaw, he was another one of our boys, Adam Lallana. There were lots of players who become top players. A man in the news today, Gareth Bale, these types of boys. And they were fantastic days in terms of being involved with players who went on or are still top players. So that was obviously a high spot for me, Southampton. Pete won't be too happy to hear this. I was then offered a job by Mourinho and Brendan Rodgers at Chelsea. To be honest, Chelsea wasn't for me at the time. So I turned that one down, and everybody, including my wife and 2 sons, said, "Dad, you've just turned down a job at Chelsea." I said, "Yeah, but I just like the environment that we'd created as a group of staff at Southampton." And then about a year after turning down Chelsea, I had a phone call from my chairman at Southampton. It was a bit like the headmaster and chief education officer phone call. The chairman rang me to say, "We've had an approach from Liverpool for you to go there as head of recruitment. Would you like to speak to them?" Because he knew I turned down Chelsea, so I said yes. I went to Liverpool and I took the job. Probably my legacy at Liverpool, I was only there 3 years because I was in the centre of, I think I'd call it a war between Rafa Benitez and Steve Highway, who was the academy manager. And I was caught in the middle. And I remember on my last day there, there was one player that I became very attached to because the coaches didn't want him. And I was adamant that I was going to support the head of local recruitment and sign him. So on my last day, I called his mum and said, "Could you pop in to see me today before training?" And on my wall, I had Theo Walcott's Arsenal shirt when he played at Anfield, and Gareth Bale's shirt when he played for Tottenham at Anfield. They were on my wall. And I remember Trent Alexander-Arnold and his mum coming into my office. And I said, "This is my last day." And I could say, "What do you mean your last day?" I said, "Well, I'm leaving." I said, "But I'm going to leave you a challenge." I gave him Gareth Bale's shirt. I gave him Theo Walcott's shirt. I said, "My challenge to you is, will you ever play against them?" And fortunately, he's not only played against them, he's also played in the Champions League final against Gareth Bale. So I'm still in text contact with him and his mum. So he was my legacy at Liverpool, really. Although it's strange now to see the likes of the Ox at Liverpool. Adam Lallana has obviously just left there. So I then went, or still am, at Fulham as head of recruitment. The Southampton team, if you like, of Hugh Jennings, who ironically worked with Peter and myself in this community programme at Oxford, and Steve Wigley, who's our head coach. We were all together at Southampton. We're now back together at Fulham. And in terms of players at Fulham, we've had some really decent players in the last 10 years, but people probably will talk about Ryan Sessegnon. It's really nice to have been involved with Ryan. Then you talk about Moussa Dembélé, who obviously is now in France with Lyon. The first team goalkeeper at Fulham at the moment, Marek Roddick, is another boy who's come through the system. Talking about Sam Ricketts and Dean Whitehead earlier, they've taken one of our young players. So, listen, there's been lots of disappointments. I've made lots of mistakes in signing players that maybe it hasn't worked out.
I think, Malcolm, you're looking at the players that are still involved in the game, as in sport, Dave Penny and Les Robinson involved in Swaycliffe School. But I think our involvement with those players, getting them out to what we did in the schools, has probably helped them in what they do now, I think.
Oh, absolutely, And a classic was Mickey Lewis. A fantastic person. He was very much a role model in the way he went about things. So personable. I see Mickey now down at Oxford City, but there's endless amount of players that we were involved with, through the community programme.
Yeah. Well, Foggy. Foggy went to Everton and, still
because when I
involved
was
in the
at
game.
Liverpool, he was at Everton, Foggy. But, And it is a strange thing, because if Dennis Smith, bless him, had been making the appointments, you wouldn't have been here. Les Taylor wouldn't have been here, and Mark Jones wouldn't have been here. Because Dennis's advice to me was, I gather you bringing in Peter Rhoades-Brown. He said, do you know how popular he is with the fans and the supporters? Do you not see him as a threat to you? And he also said the same about Jonah and Les, because they were players. And I've had this conversation with Dennis since. And, I said, Dennis, I really appreciate your advice. I said, I'm confident that the three men concerned can make this, a thriving programme. And I said, what you just mentioned about them being ex-players actually gives me what I don't have, because I wasn't an ex-player. But I knew that I could get the best out of Rosie, Jonah and Les, and they could get the best out of me.
I think there's that team, to talk about team spirit, that was a team in that office where you had the knowledge and the organisation. I'm better organised now than I was, I must admit, I am. And I'm early as well. I'm always early to meetings now. So I've learned a lot from you. So I've taken everything that you've set up and I wouldn't say made it bigger. I've just stretched it and moved it around a bit. And still, we dealt with so many children in the county. And you see they're season ticket holders now, as we've said before, about the generations. And then you've moved on and done what you've done, which is incredible what you've done. I did my 22 years in the community and moved it on to Chris Lowe's now and Alex Blaine and all those boys there. So, and I see what they do in the community now, because my 11-year-old goes on the courses. So it's amazing how it goes round. So that's where we've gone from there to there. And I wouldn't say we've gone there or there. We've just gone wider and bigger. And that's down to what you've set up right from the base of it back in middle of the 80s or late 80s. We've taken it from there to where it is now. So it's it's still going ahead, which is down to you as well.
No, listen, I think that we had a firm base when I left. Yeah. You've definitely, as a club and a community department, you diversified. We were specific about just football-related things. I was interested earlier about you talking about, going to talk to people who perhaps are having bad experiences, bullying, anti-smoking. So it's great to see that the club have, moved on, and it is now possibly more of a community programme because you've diversified. Yep. And I think, obviously still got a great reputation in the community. And I think, like everything, it's about, for me personally, my thing is about finding the next player. And in the community programme, I think it's about finding the next initiative, which is important to people in the community.
You've both seen football from different ends, from being a PE teacher to scouting some of the best youngsters around, and yourself, Rosie, in the various roles you've had at the club. So you've seen precocious players, you've seen pushy parents. What sort of advice would you give to a parent who thinks they've got a talented kid? And what advice would you give to a kid who's looking to make their way in the game?
I think as a parent now, with Max is now playing at Quarry, try to be the model parent on the sidelines. It is tough. I've seen the other side of it. But parents just need to take a step back and just let the boy get on or the girl get on with it. Don't push too hard. For me, it's just let them go and enjoy it. It's the most important thing. We've always said that about enjoying football. And if there's too much pressure coming from the parent, the kids won't enjoy it. Let us organise the kid. Let us sort of let them work of how we want them to work. But basically, the kids just need to, if you've got talent, and if you're not getting spotted yet, you will. If you're good enough, you always get spotted. You'll have a chance of becoming a footballer, be it in the girls' football or the boys' football. But yeah, parents, with the Respect programme that's come in, it's been massively helpful to coaches and clubs. Some need to bite their tongue a bit. I did on Sunday, actually. But no, it's tough. But, there's still lots of kids' involvements in sport locally in Oxfordshire and everywhere around. But yeah, it's there's they've still got a chance of becoming a pro footballer.
And the same question to you, Malcolm.
I think the most significant thing that's changed, obviously, is the agency world. Obviously, they can't sign players till they're 16. I think, unfortunately, in some cases, there are agents who just want to move players. I think that parents have a massive responsibility, as Peter said. When I talked earlier about Theo Walcott, Gareth Bale, I'm still in touch with the boys and their parents because they were grounded kids and still are grounded. When I talk about Luke Shaw, grounded kid. Oxlade-Chamberlain, grounded kid. Alexander-Arnold, grounded kid. We went to sign a boy from Paris Saint-Germain at Fulham. So what did I do? I asked Moussa Dembélé to ring him because he was at Paris Saint-Germain as a kid, came to Fulham. So I think that the biggest thing for me is don't get too carried away. Just keep your feet on the floor. The opportunities, if you're good enough, will come. You don't need to go chasing them. Like we just lost a boy to Liverpool, and it was a bit acrimonious, unfortunately, the way it was done. He became the youngest ever player in the Premier League, and at the end of last season, he left for no apparent reason. He was in the first team at Fulham. Whereas on the other side of the coin, you have Ryan Sessegnon, who stayed loyal when the big clubs wanted him. And in all honesty, when he went, it was the right time for him. So I think parents and players have to be more respectful also of people who've worked with them. Like I remember Pete when him and Jonah at Blackwood Leeds at Reedfield, he used to take the under-9s, 10s and the 11s. And, the one thing I knew for certain was those kids were going to have fun. And, if they needed disciplining, Pete and Jonah would do that. But essentially, they gave those kids a great foundation. And I think that, coaches have a massive responsibility as well to challenge the kids, but also to let them enjoy themselves.
Especially at an early age as well.
Yeah, massive, But parents, they can get carried away. I've seen parents fight on the touchline because one thinks his kid's the best player and somebody else thinks his kid's the best player. And you hear parents shouting at their sons and criticising them. And you think to yourself, hey, as Pete said, just take a step back and just let the boy develop naturally. And in the report system we have something called CLASS, which is character, learning ability, speed, strength, success. For me, I remember with Maurice Evans, who was another great Oxford United person, he always used to say to me, Malcolm, people don't fulfill their potential because of one thing. They've either got a lack of desire, they've got a flaw in their character. Because, Pete, you'd have played with some fantastic players, potentially, all the ability in the world, but never fulfilled their potential.
It's about passion and desire and do I really want it and stuff. And I was never the best player at school as well. We had better players at school, but I had more passion and desire. I was in bed early before a game and everything else. And but no, you're right. It comes from the heart and if things are going wrong for you, can you dig a bit deeper? Some players can't be bothered, so they're never going to make it. So I was always, right from the off as a kid, I was always 100% and gave everything. And I'm still doing that in the community, and I'm still doing that in the commercial. So I'm still doing that in life in general. You wake up in the morning, it's a 7 out of 10 for me. I'm still breathing. Let's kick on,
Yeah, and coming back to that, character is enormous for me in a plan. Because, the character of the player and the players is the character of the team. And, you see lots of managers that they have that character, that personality. Brian Horton, for example, ex-Oxford United manager, went to Man City. Brian was crazy, And then you get a Mark Lawrenson, who was the first manager when I came. I remember one Friday afternoon in the dressing room, Brian had absolutely slaughtered the players. They were playing the next day. Mark Lawrenson was sat in there, made them a cup of tea and said, hey, he doesn't mean it. And it's these things, that you get experience of. And that's why Mark and Brian would have been a fantastic Oxford United partnership. Unfortunately, Mark left because Dean Saunders was sold repeatedly to Derby County for £1. And it is this balance. But the crucial thing for me, whether it's in the community or whether it's in an academy, whether it's at first team level, is just do things right. And if I'm the coach taking a session with, any walk of life, the session will reflect you as a person. And that's why his sessions were always excellent, because, his sessions reflected him. And that's the greatest tribute I could probably pay to him, being in his company. And that's so important when you're in the community in particular. My job now is a salesman, to sell myself, tell people I found so-and-so and so-and-so, and sell for them. So nothing's changed since I was at Oxford United. What Oxford United gave me was the opportunity to learn those things. And I had a fantastic mentor, Maurice Evans, and so did Steve McLaren, because, Steve used to go to Maurice all the time.
And I'm a salesman now because I'm on the commercial side of it. And when I came across, I thought, not a salesman. They said, well, you are a salesman because you've been selling the football in the community to parents and because you're able to speak to people, but you learn how to speak to people nicely and you believe in your product, you believe in your club and you've got that passion. Can I just say, finishing off here, Malcolm and I haven't really sat like this since in the office at the Manor, really. This long, honestly, it's killing him and killing me. And we've never sat this long without a beer, have we? And, right from the off, Malcolm set it all up. We've taken it on a journey and everything else and stuff. So, and we've still got that rapport and banter. And I know it's just that respectful thing, isn't it, over the years? So.
And 30 odd years on, the club can be proud of the community programme.
Yeah.
And I guess you two can be proud of what you set in motion.
Yeah, I'm proud that I've handed it over to the boys and it's like still going strong, that's fine. And I'm sure Malcolm would is the same, that he's handed it over and it was still kicking and, which is good, isn't it?
In all the clubs I've been to since I left here, I've always taken an interest into the community programme. But, we were fortunate. And you make your own luck. But we were fortunate that the players were like they were at the time. Yeah. We had something special, not just the banter in the office, which was great, but we also had the support of the players. And it's really fun, to hear the players talk about going out to such and such a school or, watching the games on the Manor instead of going back in the change room. They'd sit on the sideline now, stand on the sideline, watch the games. And you can't replace those things, no matter what else you do. Finding a player for me is what my role has developed into. But nothing gave me greater pleasure than these activities that Peter and myself have been reflecting on. So the boys in the community are massively, massively important and deserve probably more recognition than they get sometimes.
Well, one final question then, Malcolm. Your reputation in Oxfordshire spreads far and wide, and a lot of Oxford United fans will say, that Malcolm Elias, I remember him shouting at me at Blackbird Leeds, or he robbed us of a player and things like that. But you still hold the club in high esteem and you still live locally, so it's still a club close to your heart.
Listen, Oxford United, is in some respects my club. I've got good relationships with the boys in the academy. The first team manager, Carl Robinson, He used to work with me a long time ago at Liverpool. Carl, he has his roots in the community because Carl started Liverpool Community Programme. He was involved in my recruitment department because Carl would take the week's trialists when they came from Europe, etc. So Carl, this is where Carl started. And I'm delighted that, he's manager of this football club. I'm still in touch with him regularly. We still have some laughs about the trialist weeks that we used to have. And listen, he's got a reputation for playing young players. So he's another one that has had great experiences with young people at all levels. So no, listen, I was devastated when, I'll say we lost to Wickham, because it would have been great to see the club go up one more notch. But no, listen, this is a club with great tradition, has always had good people, and in safe hands. He's still here.
Well, 36 years, somebody asked me last night, I said 36 years service. And he went, I said, well, either I'm doing a really good job or nobody else wants me. and I think the jury's out on that, Malcolm.
Combination of two.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Welcome to this morning's session. So we're going to stand up quite soon today. So first of all, in the chair, we're just going to bring our weight forward. So wiggle those hips, bring yourself a bit forward in the chair, heels back, little lean forward, drive up through those legs. Good. And just give the heels a little bit of a pump. That's just so we don't feel dizzy when we first stand up. And then take yourself round towards the back of the chair. I am going to do most of the movement at the side of the chair, but use the chair as much as you need to for support yourselves when you're doing the exercises. So step into the side of the chair. We're just going to start off with just a little tiny march. Just let the arms swing if you feel okay with that. Super. And then just bring your feet to a nice little halt. So we always think about posture whenever we're doing these exercises. So nice width in the feet as if you're standing on a little railway line. Now we're just going to do some exercises just to warm up the muscles and warm up the joints, getting ourselves ready for a little bit more exertion. So we're just going to start by waving the hands as if you are wiping a big window screen. Super, good. And last one. Brilliant. And just bring that arms down, resting by your side. And we're just going to take those shoulders up towards your ears and let them come back down again. Super. Up towards your ears and back down. Lovely. And just one more. Up towards your ears and let them come back down again. Super. This time with the hands, bring them together at the front. So you're pressing a little bit through the palms of the hands. And we're just going to do a little turn off to one side and then to the other side. So you're just letting the upper body just turn and follow the hands. Super. Last one to each side. Excellent, good. Give those hands a little shake. Good. So we're going down to the feet a little bit. So we're going to dig with the heel and tap with the toe. And dig with the heel and tap with the toe. Last one, dig with the heel, tap with the toe. Super. Go into the other leg. So we're going to dig with the heel, tap with the toe. Dig with the heel, tap with the toe. So just one more. Dig with the heel, tap with the toe. Lovely. So we're going to do the same movement now. We're going to bring in some arm movement. So we're just going to dig and tap. There. Dig with that heel and bring those arms in for a little bicep curl. Super. Keeping the knees nice and soft. So we have a little tiny bit of a bend in those knees as well. Last one. Super. Bring those arms down. Give them a nice little shake. Give your heels a little pump. And then just bring your feet to a nice little halt. And we're just going to give those hips a nice big roll. So we want to get these hips nicely warmed up because we're going to do quite a little bit with the hips today. Super. And go in the other direction. Fantastic. Last one. Lovely. And then just take those hips side to side. Just giving them a little push. Side to side. Lovely. And then just let your arms just dangle by your side. And we're just going to pick up the heel of one leg. So I'm just going to turn to the side, pick up the heel, and just give it a little twist. And just let the knees just follow the toes. And you should feel that going right up into the hip joint. Super. Last one. Brilliant. Put that foot down. Pick up the heel of the other leg. And just let that heel just go side to side. And you should feel that going right up into the joint, into the rail ball and socket of that hip joint. Super. Put that leg down. Give the feet a little tiny march. Lovely. Good. Fantastic. Excellent. So take yourselves back behind the chair. And take your feet a little bit wider. And we're just going to go into a little sway, side to side. Now I want you to stay in this position. I'm just going to move my chair out of the way again so you can see. Nice width in the feet. And we go in. And we can put in a little sway. Good. And we can put in a little dip of the knees. So pushing that bottom back and stretching up with those arms. Stretching up. Good. Just as far as you feel comfortable to go. Excellent. And last one to each side. Lovely. Bring those arms down into a little march. Good. Super. Now I want you to stay behind your chair, so you've got that chair there for support. I'm just going to stay at this side of the chair so you can see. So the next exercise is a little bit about building the muscle on the side of the hips, but it's also balance because we're going to be going onto one leg. So we're going to bring one leg out and bring it back in, and to the other side and bring it back in. We can bring an arm in if we want to. Excellent. Lovely. And last one on each side. Brilliant. Just have a little march through those feet and just let those arms dangle by your side. Super. Lovely. So the next little bit now, we're going to do a couple of strength exercises. So we're going to do one at the lower part of the body first, then we're going to do one at the upper part of the body. So again, I'm going to turn sideways, but I want you to stay to the side of your chair so you've got it there for a bit of support. So with the outside leg, so for you it would be this leg. So with the outside leg, bring it forward. And we're going to bend the knees and drop directly down. So drive that back knee down and back up. And drive it down and back up. Lovely. 3 more. Drive it down and back up. Just let the front knee just bend gently. Good. Super. Last one. Excellent. Push up and a little march through those feet. Brilliant. Good. And bring your feet to a nice little halt, and then we're going to roll them shoulders again and roll them round. Brilliant. Good. Bring yourself, if you're standing, to the side of the chair. You now need to come to the other side of the chair. So this time I'm just going to take a step forward again like we did on the other side, making sure you've got that nice width in your feet so you're standing on that railway line. And we're going to drop the back knee towards the floor. Drop it down and back up again. Good. Push it down and really drive through them toes and drive through that front foot to bring yourself back to a nice standing position. Last one. And stand. Good. Bring your feet in. Nice little march. Super. So the next exercise is another strength one. So for this one, you're going to need a tea towel, scarf, something with a little bit of stretchiness in it. I'm going to use a little stretchy band, and I want you to curl it in so you've got it in front of you and your hands are sat one on top of the other like a little tower, and you're going to bring it into your chest. Now the elbows are coming out like you've got some chicken wings going on, and then we're going to twist the band, and when we get to the end, try and pull it apart and then bring it in. And don't forget your chicken wings each time you come in, and push it out and pull. Super. And just one more. Squeeze the band, give it a twist, give it a pull. Fantastic. Bring it in, swap your hands over so we've got equal amount on each side. So this is building up some strength in the fingers and the hands and the wrists. So bring it in first, get your chicken wings going, and then twist and pull. Super. Good. Relax at the top, and then squeeze and turn and pull. Good. And just one more. So squeeze and twist and pull. Lovely. Bring that band in, or bring the scarf in, whatever you're using, and make sure you put it out of the way so you're not going to slip or trip over it when we go further along. So little march through those legs, give those hands a nice little shake because they'll have been working really hard with those fingers. Super. Good. Excellent. So bring yourself behind the chair. Again, I'm just going to stay to the side so you can see. And we're cooling down now. We're bringing our body back to what we were like before we started exercising. So I want you to take your feet a little bit wider. And we're just going to keep the inside leg straight, and we're just going to bend the outside leg. And so we're getting a little stretch down the inside of that thigh. And then come back up and go down to the other side. Little stretch down the inside of the thigh. Try and keep your head and your chest facing forward, and come back up. And we're just going to do one more to each side. So when you get into the movement there and you've come down, you bent those knees, just try and hold that position. And come back up and down to the other side. Good. And back up. Nice. Bring your feet in. Nice little march through those feet. Lovely. And then just bring yourself to a nice little halt. Now we work these fingers and hands and the forearms. So we're going to do a little stretch just to make it feel a little bit better. So take one hand out to the front. Catch hold of your fingers with the opposite hand. And just give a little tiny pull on the fingers. It shouldn't be painful, it should just be like a mild tension. Super. Bring the arm down, give it a little shake. Then we go into the other side, so bring the hand up first, fingers onto here, and give it a little pull. And you should feel the stretch going through the forearm and into the fingers. And bring it down and give the arms a little shake and give the feet a little march. Super. Lovely. Last stretch. So take a step forward with the outside leg, and this time we're going to take the weight back onto the back leg and bend that knee, but keep your chest facing upwards, and just lift the toes very slightly. And we should feel that stretch going into the hamstring. Back of the leg at the top. And looking forward. So these hips have worked really hard today, and these hamstrings. Lots of hip movement today. And bring the other leg forward. Drop the weight directly back onto the back leg by bending the knee. Use the chair for support, so we don't want no wobbling when we're stretching. Drop it back and come up and bring yourself to a nice standing position. Good. And we do a big stretch out to the side, as big as you can. And then relax those arms. Roll them shoulders. And then just bring your hands out a little bit and bring them together at speed and give yourselves a big clap. Well done.